Hi, this is Tom Soane, and welcome to another episode of the Anonymous Landlord. And today I am really pleased to bring to you some real life investors that have a proven track record, a great story of how they've built a portfolio of properties. They specialize in rent to rent as well as buy, refurbish, refinance, or flip to let, as I call it. And today, I'm very proud to bring them to you to share their story of how they got started, what sort of properties they were into, how they found properties, how they funded properties. And there's going to be a little bit of a twist in this one, because there's a story here as well about how one part of this partnership overcame a difficult situation, which I bet a lot of people listening to this can relate to. So we're going to share that story as well, and hopefully gives you a bit of motivation and a bit of confidence and inspiration to start investing for yourself. So I just want to say thank you very much to James and Kiera for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Tom. It's our first one, so go easy.
Yes, I love that. This is your podcast virginity.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So, thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for giving your time to share your story. I think things like this, when you hear other people telling their story of how they got started and how they bought property and invested their money and so on, correct me if I'm wrong, but this kind of gives other people that motivation of, oh, well, if they can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. If I'm doing DIY, which I'm going to be doing today at home, or gardening, I've got a podcast on, and without that, I don't think I would have taken the steps, or we would have taken the steps quite as fast as we did. So yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, I think as well, there are so many people that have fears about getting into property investing, and things might go wrong. They're going to lose all their money. The property is going to fall down. They're going to get the worst tenants in the world, all of those things. And then they see somebody else who's had the same fears. Everybody has the fears. I've been doing this for 20 odd years and I still have those fears. But yeah, so thank you very much for letting me hear your story and letting everybody listen to this hear your story.
No problem.
Let's start with Realm Properties, which is your business. Do you want to tell me a bit about what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Realm is our newest and latest kind of venture with two other directors, two other company owners. And that is now our vehicle for both purchasing properties that we're going to keep and properties that we're going to flip and turn over. Cool. Realm, what we've done is incorporate some skills of some other friends for more of the tech side. So they're a lot more savvy on the technicalities of online attracting investment and that side of it. Whereas me and Kiera have the background more on the ground, as it will more front line of speaking to different people that are either offloading distressed properties, speaking to estate agents firsthand, sourcing them, and then setting up the builds and the build outs of those properties.
So you've really built your property investment plan, if you like, into a business. That's what it sounds like you did. You've got the right components in place, the right people in place, the right systems in place, and you're bringing in some tech as well to automate certain parts of that. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that is where we fell down. It was that whole thing in my head of you can get so far on your own, and then when me and Kiera started kind of crossing lines with like getting our targets aligned, we got that push, that kind of drive on, and then we realized actually accountability, sharing it between, there's now four of us, and we just keep the momentum going through conversation. They live local to us, they're friends of ours. It keeps the momentum going, and it's that thing of 100% of something or half of something even bigger, and that's where we saw the benefit for all of us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that's where a lot of people you'll either make that transition to become a proper investor, or you'll stay put as just a simple landlord. and neither is bad or good. It doesn't really matter. It's just some people make the transition into turning it into a business, growing it, expanding it, setting out business plans. Yeah. And so I agree. And do you know what it is? It's the anonymous landlord, isn't it? That's the whole point of it, in that you're setting up systems and automation and management systems in order to allow your properties to make profit without you. And I guess that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I know you allude to a lot, and kind of going back through your back catalogue of every single phone call. I mean, we'll touch on it with the rent to rent, especially later, but every single phone call we receive, we try and think what should be in place so that we're not receiving that phone call, and trying to, having that focus of that's how we're going to build. It doesn't have to always be, here's our plan. It can be the other way around. As something comes in, it won't come in again, because the system will then be built.
Yeah, I love that. And it rings true to me. Look, not every landlord or property investor wants to be anonymous. Some people actually want to do all of those phone calls, take all of those tenant calls, do all the viewings, do all the maintenance arrangements and so on. That's fine. Personally, I think that the best way to be a property investor and a landlord is to not be a property investor and a landlord, if that makes sense, right? Just have the money come in. I'd rather have a little bit less money, just a little bit less money, but have all my time, all my mental health and sanity about me.
Yeah.
Now that's awesome, and well done to you for building that. It sounds like you learned the hard way.
Tom, absolutely. And as you're saying that, I'm just thinking back to the initial ones of, you think of a day rate and the amount you feel you're worth. And I'm okay at painting and decorating. I'm no professional, but I can do a room in double the time it takes a professional, and to a good standard. But then you have to, and it's taken me, from my background and my upbringing, a long time to try and give those things away. I was fine to give away, fitting kitchens, tiling, stuff that I wouldn't be able to do to their level. But it was hard at first to pay someone, I don't know, £150, £200 a day to paint a property, when I thought, cool, that's something that I've got the time. But then you realise that building relationships with someone like yourself, other estate agents, other letting agents, is actually, in the long run, has that higher return than it does for me to spend a day going to buy some paint, going to buy the materials, and then doing it ourselves. It took us ages, and I'm still trying to break that mold of
our first property. You and your dad decorated everywhere. You did the tiling, I did the cleaning, and I remember I used to dread tenant changeovers, because it was very much us going in and doing everything. So at the time when we first got into property, we had them fully managed, because we didn't know much about the lettings process. But again, we were very hands-on with regards to the maintenance and the DIY and stuff. And looking back now, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, I certainly don't want to be going in and cleaning any flats.
Yeah, I don't blame you. And I think this is a big problem with many people. It's the same for me in business. I mean, in my business, I have staff members that all have roles and responsibilities. I have management systems that automate and delegate and manage all components of the business. But even now, if a leaflet needs designing, I want to do it, because I think, well, I'm not going to pay a graphic designer to do it. I can do it. But then I have to remind myself, well, no, let somebody else do that who's a professional at doing it, and is going to do it to a really high standard, rather than me spending a whole day designing one leaflet, which is going to be half standard, So I'm totally with you. And it takes a lot to allow somebody else to do the things that you can do.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of confidence. Okay, yeah, that's a really good, I think that's a really good tip or point for people that you just described there about letting go. Try it. That's the way I think. Try it out. Let some of these things go. If you start from the beginning and you just allow yourself to be 100% anonymous and let people do all of the things that are involved with running, managing and growing your property and your portfolio, And then you'll be able to sit back and see, okay, well, I want to do that bit and I want to do that bit. But the rest of it, yeah, you guys can keep. That's fine.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Where did you get started on this property journey of growing your investment portfolio?
So when I was thinking about this last night, because you have that, once you tell yourself something, that's what you then believe, isn't it? You then go back through and think, well, that's what it was. But I thought I'll go a bit deeper into, well, where did it even come from? And I had a bank account years ago when interest rates were above 0.25, and it was a 6% fixed rate for maybe 2 years. You put the money in, I don't even know if you could add to it, and then you took the money out after the 2-year period. And I put some savings into this bank account because that was, I mean, even then that was good. Now that would be absolutely incredible. And then, you know, the timeline went by and the interest rate came in, and you're like, wow, okay, that's great. And then there was nothing like that. And Kiera was an estate agent and just mentioned about this property that someone we knew of was selling. They kind of wanted to get rid of it quick. There was none of the stamp duty, land tax then. So we thought, okay, well, what does this work out if we put this much in with our deposit, solicitors' fees? Kiera knew of decent solicitors because of the industry. We worked it all out. We thought, okay, it gives us around about 8-9% return on what we put in, you know. And I thought, great, you know, I'm really happy with that. We're getting 2 or 3% in the bank. It was either put it into our house, which we had a mortgage on, as was the normal way to kind of save, or try something a bit different. And yeah, it just spiraled from there. Admittedly, the first one, I rang my mum and said, because I was a bit nervous, I was like, what do you think? And she'd been burnt by property. She had a bad tenant, sold up a flat that she had. I think there was a flood, if I remember rightly, and they weren't told about it. And I thought, okay, well, so I listened to my mum and my dad, but she was keen. I explained it to her. I think I kept on and on at her, to be fair.
Yeah.
And we went halves on this property. And yes, even then, even when the rent was coming in, we still weren't taking it seriously, were we?
No.
It was still sat there as, you know, this is what it is. I had no idea about other strategies. And then from studying books, it took off from there, Tom.
It was our first few purchases until we really realised that we could actually make something of it. Because then quickly after you purchased the first one with your mum, we then purchased another one, which was literally next door, because again, we saw the returns on it. And at the time, again, you know, it was just an investment, wasn't it? You know, we didn't take it seriously and realize actually what we were creating. And a lot of people talk about the snowball effect, and that was the start of it. So we did that one, we got the second one. And then I think quickly after that, I know you've done the figures with regards to how often we purchased. But talking about the fear and stuff, I do remember having the savings in my bank account that I was quite comfortable. I could see those savings there. And then obviously sending that money across to the solicitor, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've just got rid of all my savings and I can't see it anymore. And yeah, we had a few issues with the tenant. And yeah, I remember thinking, what on earth have we done? And luckily that was the last kind of really bad tenant we had.
It absolutely started from, can we beat what we're getting elsewhere, or is it best just to put it into our house? Which I think from the people I speak to, that I always believe that speaking to someone one step ahead of you is the best person to speak to next, rather than, you know, if I look at the people in property that I would consider they're miles away from me, that they've built out systems and education platforms and everything that's so unattainable at the moment, that I'm not going to gain much other than maybe the books they've released, but actually kind of trying to get something out of what they're doing is not there. But starting to speak to others about the next step and realizing, okay, we want to try and get these a bit more below market value. You know, quite a nice start is, well, I can't keep saving up deposits, so below market value is going to be our our next step. Something quite simple, just putting offers in there. Really, there were properties that didn't need much work, just getting them below market value and moving on from there. But big believer of going for those, following those people and talking to those people that are literally a couple of steps ahead of you rather than miles away.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And you know what? A few really good tips in there. And anybody listening to this, I think will probably relate to that situation where, Kiera, as you said, you've got money in the bank and you can see it in the bank. It's safe there, so you think, right? I mean, unless the world goes crazy again, but you can see it there, you know it's there, it's safe. And all right, it's not doing anything, and technically you're losing money by it being sat in an account, but it's there. And that's it. And I think a lot of people will relate to that. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you have this feeling of, my money's not doing anything, but it's there. But it's not doing anything, but it's there. But it's not doing anything, but it's there. You sort of argue with yourself. Yeah. And so I absolutely agree. And I see that sort of thing as what I would classify as pots. So my accountant taught me this. He just saw everything as cash pots. And so your bank account is one cash pot and your property is another cash pot. And you're not doing anything other than taking it out of this cash pot and putting it into this cash pot. Just because you can't see the number, it's still there. And at any one point, you then go, right, I'm going to take that cash out of this one and put it into this one, and take a bit of that cash out and put it into this one, And I love that analogy, because then my imagination just sees it as different pots. And now I've got different property pots, and I've got different business pots, and I've got different investment pots, and I just move the money around all the way. And another thing you said quite interestingly there is about the snowball effect. And you could probably link that to compounding as well. I'm a big believer in compound investing, definitely in property, where in fact, and sorry, I'm going on a bit here, but I'll get to the point. One of the biggest mistakes I see property investors make, they set themselves a plan, say a 5-year plan. I'm going to have 5 properties in 5 years, and it's going to generate me a couple of grand a month in profit, right? But during that 5 years, they spend all their profits. And so actually what you end up with at the end of the 5 years, you've not reinvested any of that money that you set out in your 5-year plan.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I always try and tell people, if I have quite a few strategy calls and discovery calls with people that want to get into property investing. And one of the first things I say to them is, right, if we set out this 5-year plan, use that profit, or use some of that profit. We'll agree what the plan is, use some of that profit to reinvest and recycle, and then you're constantly compounding your investment, and it grows so quickly. That's what I do anyway. So yeah, really, really interesting points there. I think a lot of people will relate to that. So, okay, you went halves with your mum, you bought a property, and you had a couple of experiences, you bought a couple more, you had a couple of experiences with bad tenants, but then it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, it kind of leveled out a bit, and then they started generating an income, and then you decided to go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we, like I say, we bought in the same block. It was flats. We bought in the same block. And they generated, like I say, nicely. They weren't groundbreaking. And it's funny, I say to friends that are interested that now, with a bit of knowledge in the area, we're in the same area as you, Tom. We're in Portsmouth and surrounding. Yeah, that's right. So, and I said that they always say, well, what, especially the guys that are into maybe stocks and shares and stuff like that, they'll ask, well, what are the returns? Because they're that bit more clued up. And I'll say that effectively, me and you can go out today, and we could find a property today that generates like an 8% return. We could go out today, we could put down your deposit, all your fees, and we could comfortably find you somewhere that generates an 8% return. Now that's great. That's a solid return. Factor in a bit of buffer, there's an 8% return there. I then say to people, if we want to go out and spend a couple of weeks, I reckon we could find somewhere below market value after throwing some offers that generates maybe a 12 to 15% return. It's going to take a bit more work, but we could find that. It's going to need some, a bit of a void period whilst we do it up. And then I always say, if you want over 20%, it's going to take some effort. It's going to take some work. And I think it's going to take someone who's going to take it seriously. To actually have a build team that they rely on, all the backing of a good mortgage advisor that you're in contact with, that gets on well with your solicitor, and so on and so forth. So I think we started then linking our returns and looked at what we had to, do we want to be managing people constantly and going for just the most dilapidated, worst properties that we can find, and then doing the numbers and then, being happy that all of our time is taken up by that? And we're like, no, I still work a full-time job. Kiera at the time was still working a full-time job. So we thought, no, what we're going to do is we're going to go for the ones that return what we would consider, our goal was we wanted to get a 20% return, but we wanted to pull out 50% of our deposit. That was our benchmark. Yep. So we set that, and that's what we managed to start finding.
Perfect. And great point. Really, it all comes back down to yield. Always comes back down to yield on your money. And again, big thing I see people do is they make mistakes with calculating that yield at the front end, and then they buy properties that don't actually return a good yield because they haven't calculated it right. And you know what? I've actually done a little bit of a 180 recently, because I talk a lot about true yield. And your true yield is an ever-evolving figure. It changes constantly because it's an amalgamation, or a calculation, of your equity, your cash employed, appreciation, depreciation, net profits, tax, everything. And people miss all those things. What they do is they work out, what's the annual rent? £10,000 divided by the purchase price. That's my yield. It's not even
I've never used it. Yeah.
Yield.
And you know what? Yeah, really good point. So what I did was a bit of a 180, because I realized that when I explained true yield, which is a monstrous calculation, because your equity is ever expanding and compressing, and you refinance, and then it compresses, and then it expands, and then compresses, and so on and so on. Some months you'll make more profit than other months because you have maintenance to take care of, and then you've got a tax bill to pay, and so on and so on. So I've simplified it and just used cash employed, which is basically, if you buy a property and you're going to use £50,000 of your own cash, that's that pot. And that's the pot that I was talking. You take £50,000 out of your bank pot and you put it into your property pot. That's 50,000 employed in that pot, right? And then if then you add some value and you refinance that property, but you're still going to leave £10,000 of your cash in that pot, but you've taken 40,000 out of that pot and put it back in your bank pot, then that property investment employs £10,000 of your cash. You agree with that, don't you? That's how you do it too.
100%.
And then if you're getting rent of £10,000 each year, but out of that you're paying £5,000 in mortgage payments, insurance, management, maintenance, whatever, tax, then you're left with £5,000 per year against your £10,000 investment. Yeah. And there's your 50, well, it's 50%. I mean, I'm making figures up here, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, and that is exactly, we've built out with, I have to be honest, it was over a couple of bottles of wine. I knew what I wanted this calculator to say, and our other business partner, they're a couple, so that's why I say they. Our other business partners are more tech. So I said, look, I do everything manually. I've got bits of paper everywhere. I'm a firefighter, so that I'm very, very task focused, very manual, whereas he's more in tech. And I said, look, I need this spreadsheet to say these in these boxes. I was like, do you reckon you'd be able to do it at some point? He's like, yeah, we'll do it now. And I was like, wow, to me, that's, some kind of magic. But that's all we use now is ROAST. We call it ROAST, return on cash employed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's exactly what you said, but take it a step, maybe not further, but in another direction of, I completely agree with what you say. So, if we do a buy refurb refinance or a flip to let, as I know you go with, so we'll go, okay, well, we've left in, I don't know, £10,000 we've left in that deal, which is great if it returns the numbers that you're talking about. But then we'll work out, okay, for exit strategy purposes, what is the sale on that? Because obviously you've got that other money, that deposit sat there. So whatever it's gone up by, you've got the additional 25% of that sat there. So for the calculator that we've got and that we share, we try to work out, okay, if we're going into this property and we want to keep it and it meets our criteria for the kind of property, we're a little bit more with things like flats, we're a bit more, okay, because obviously you've got service charges, we're a bit more stringent. If it's borderline, we want the exit strategy of a sale to make it worthwhile. We don't want it just to be, okay, well, that gives us 30% return, which is great. We also want to know that there's maybe, I don't know, £25,000-30,000 profit if it becomes a sale rather than a keep.
Yeah,
so,
I agree. And if you talk to your accountant, he'll talk about balance sheets and profit and loss and stuff like that. And actually, this is where the true yield thing comes from. If you speak to a proper investor of anything, if someone is a person who invests, then you are, all right, your physical cash, you're leaving 10,000 in that property. Absolutely right. And you've made a really good point that you've still got a ton of equity sat there too. And that's your cash as well. And what you're choosing to do is not sell that property. So therefore you're not taking that cash out. So you're leaving it in there. And that's what true yield is, in that actually your investment is the £10,000 that you're leaving in there has to be repaid because that's a debt. The asset owes you £10,000.
Yes.
But then there's equity of £25,000, let's just say. So once that debt's repaid, your investment is then your equity, right? But no, we could get into a whole thing about.
Yeah, I realise. Yeah.
But I realise I'm probably throwing out so many calculations, and people are probably glazing over a little bit. But I love that you are on the right page when it comes to yield. Definitely got your heads switched on for sure. Okay, so Realm Properties, you also work with investors as well?
Yes, yeah. That was something new. We used bridging. We used bridging on an auction purchase, solely bridging, which we found really good. Ran the numbers, had the exits covered. We knew, for example, our bridge amount just for like rough figures was around about the 680 for the bridge, and then there was a service charge. But we knew that the property would rent when it was done up for about 875. So February last year, we got it signed, sealed, delivered, around about 33% below market value, which was great. At an auction, Kiera went along. It was
so nerve-wracking. I've never felt adrenaline like it, being the one that's bidding in the room thinking, I want this, and bidding against other people. It was a good experience. Look forward to getting back to that.
Yeah, so we purchased that on a bridge, and we just knew, well, I knew from the numbers, and we know from the area, that even if we get stuck on this bridge, it can wash its face. The property will cover itself. And that's just, in my honest opinion, if you know your area, your market, and you know that these properties rent well, this is just off of the Common in Southsea, then you know that, okay, it might not make you any money, but you just got to wait for that refinance to come through. And we were more than happy with that. I mean, with my risk tolerance now, I wouldn't even mind taking a small hit if the bridge rate is higher than what we're getting in. I mean, I'm not talking anything serious, but I wouldn't mind taking that risk a bit higher now because I'm quite comfortable with that. So that was our first taste of bridging on its own. But we've done, without realizing it, we've done investor finance through friends and family before. It just wasn't official. It wasn't, what we'd call contracted. It wasn't like that. It was good agreements. People saw what we were doing, and we were able to offer them a return. But then Realm, we thought, right, we want to be able to cast our net a bit wider. So we came up with two ways of attracting investors. One being, which is very common, to offer them a fixed rate on their money for a fixed period of time. And there's a lot of people, we seem to get people around like the £30,000 upward mark that are quite interested in that, because they're people that have got money saved and it's not doing anything. And that's a large amount of money not to be earning interest. Whereas what we've started doing with our people that approach us and are like, oh, I've got £15,000, and that is their savings. That is what they have. They're interested in property, but they're not really interested in, for what we can offer them for that money, around the 8% mark. It is great returns, but to someone with that amount of money, it's not groundbreaking for them. It's not going to. So what we do with those people is we say to them, look, we can offer you a return on your money, same as we offer the people with more, or we can offer you, whilst we go through the process with this property, we will keep you in the loop and tell you about every decision we're making, because actually they're doing it because they want to get into it themselves. So they will be part of our bank of people that invest £10,000 and go, I want to be part of your education program, where all you do is update me with everything that you're doing, what you're using, the problems that you're having, how long the refinance is predicting to be. And it's kind of a passive way of them learning. And obviously at the end of the refinance, they get their money back.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And like you say, you're building a business out of it. And you've made a really good point there. I just want to pick up on, let's say 8%, right? Let's say someone's got 15 grand in the bank, and you say to them, look, actually, let's make it nice and easy. Let's say someone's got 10,000. Let's say someone's got £10,000 just sat in the bank doing nothing, which a lot of people have. And you say to them, hey, do you know what? You can't buy a property with £10,000. Well, unless you buy something up in Sunderland or something. But you, rather than it sitting there doing nothing, how about you invest in property with us and I'll pay you 10% of your money as a fixed amount, for an example. Now, the general person would quite understandably work out, okay, so I'll spend my £10,000 and I'm going to get £1,000 back.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not really a lot, is it? And it's going to take me a year to get that money back, let's just say. Just for the sake of conversation, right? So they're saying, oh, okay, so I'm going to get £83 a month. Nah, not really interested. So what they'll do is they'll leave that £10,000 in the bank doing nothing rather than get something, right?
Absolutely.
And I'll talk about compounding. If you did that same thing and you said, okay, £10,000 goes on that, or now I've got £11,000, and now I lend £11,000, and then I'm going to get 1,100 back, and keep doing it. I think, Warren Buffett, I watched an interview with Warren Buffett, and he said something like when he first bought his first ever stock, he spent something like $114 on 3 shares in a company, something like that. And he said, if I'd have just left that and reinvested all of the profit that stock made, I'd have that one stock would be worth 400,000 now. And that's just by compounding from $100,
Yeah. When you see the graphs on compounding, it's phenomenal. It's just, as you said, it's that right. I've got £10,000, and then next year it takes a year for 11. But when you actually, compound calculators are great to see, aren't they? And we've got a very young daughter who is only learning numbers, but I try and, whether it be delayed gratification of, right, you can have this now, we're going to go for a walk, and you can have 2 when we get back, trying to just get that into people early, into her, especially early. I think, especially in a world of instant gratification, compounding, as you said, is key, absolute key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So, and I love that as well, you're providing investors people might not even realize that they could be investors. They might think, oh, I've only got 10 grand in the bank. Invest it. You know, even if you've got £10 in the bank, invest it. Do something with it. Get into the habit of achieving lots of little wins. And then as you win more, you win bigger, and you win bigger and bigger and bigger, and just gets more and more and more. So just quickly before we go to the next part, if there is an investor out there that is thinking, do you know what? I got 30 grand just sat in the bank, or I've got 50 grand in equity in my home or whatever, and I want to do something with it. What would they do that you could help them with, and how could they contact you?
So I'd first of all ask them what helps them sleep at night. So I'm a massive believer, and I speak to a lot of people that are like, I just want to pay my mortgage off.
Yeah.
People close to home that say that a lot, and people that I work with and their partners. And I completely get that. And I'd say to that person, once I've had a conversation, that if that is actually what helps you sleep at night and you feel secure, then that is the right thing for you to do. It doesn't matter if you've got a mortgage of, 500 grand or 50 grand. If you're in your head, the right thing to do is pay your mortgage off, then I would say to them that have a good look at that. But if you have the appetite to take out some money or have access to some money at sub 2%, which, I mean, we're looking at a remortgage on our house at the moment because it's just our fixed rates come to an end, and I just can't believe what you can get. I mean, if we can borrow money at 1.39%, and then invest in someone like us and get an 8 to 10% return on that money, if you want to be hands off,
no work, yeah,
it's just the best. It's just the best time to do it, like because we're able to utilize that money at the moment, and a return like that is astronomically more than you get in a bank. So our website is realmproperty.co.uk. You can get in touch with us there to talk about it and talk through your options. But yeah, I would definitely say it's all about how that person feels letting go of that money. Everything that we do is secured, and we update all of our investors with what we're doing and timelines, and everything's contracted. But it's got to be the ball's in their court after they hear it. And I would, if I sense that someone's uneasy and there's a partner, them and their partner, and one of them isn't that keen, I think it could create an issue. So we definitely would say to that person, you need to both be on board with this. Yeah, because it's locked up for a period of time. We cannot access it just like you can in a bank account at 0.5%. Right. It's not like that. So yeah, I would just say look at your risk tolerance, have a good think about where you see that money going in the next period of time. It's not like stocks and shares where you've got to leave it there for a long time to ride out some waves. This is a fixed amount of return that you are getting a contract on. So yeah, and also look at the education side of it. If it's something you want to get into, if you've got a smaller amount and you want to trial it first, then what a way to look at it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good way to look at it too. And you've mentioned really about comfort zones, haven't you? Risk tolerance, and there's the opposite end of the scale in a really strange way. And I'll give you a quick story here. But so my upbringing was with zero money, and I was raised by my mum. It was difficult for my mum to get by, and didn't have anything. Sometimes we were bouncing from one sofa to the next and like that I didn't know this. All I knew that I was with my mum. It doesn't matter. It was quite a, I don't know, you look back on it and I don't remember all of that because my mum just made sure we were always happy, and our holidays were camping in a campsite and stuff like that with an old tent with holes in it, whatever. So what's quite weird is that that's your upbringing and that's what you get used to. My mum always struggled through. She ended up making a bit of a win with her business, but we still never really had any money. And then when I started in business, I was following the same thing. I was struggling, was never actually getting anywhere until I got somewhere, until I started figuring shit out and then made some money and then started making something for myself. And then you're out of your comfort zone. All of a sudden, I've got business working, properties working, investments working, and money coming in. And now I'm panicking for a whole different thing. Now I'm thinking, shit, I've got all this money coming in. What am I going to do with it? I can't just leave it in the bank doing nothing. And I'm actually getting panicky now, thinking, right, I've got money in the bank now. I need to get it out of the bank. I need to put it into something. And it's a whole different comfort level. And I think when you get to that point where your comfort zone changes, your risk tolerance changes. Because now all of a sudden I'm thinking, right, I've got money in the bank now. I need to get it out. Right, fuck it, I'll go for that one. That's a great one. Yeah, let's do it. It's a bit more risk, but sod it. You know, I've got some safe investments now. Let's go for a bit more of a risky one. And it's a real interesting way to look at it. And you're absolutely right. I think if you're just about to get into investing, then you think to yourself, I've got 50 grand in the bank. What do I want to do with that? Do I want to leave it in the bank? 50 grand. You're happy if that does nothing and just stays at 50 grand. You're happy with that. Then leave it in the bank. If you're not happy with that and you want to turn 50 grand into 55 grand and then 55 grand into 61.5 grand and so on and so on and so on, then do something with it.
Absolutely. And as you're 100% aware of, that money is being eroded with what you're getting in the bank. It's not worth what it was. That new car is now 35 grand rather than 33 grand this year, you know. So your money that was 50 grand, it is 50 grand, but a loaf of bread's gone up by 60p. So, and it's worth thinking like that, because, you know, our calculator even takes that into account, that with what GDP is doing depends on how we can work out those returns over a period of time, if that makes sense, to try and think, if we leave that there, it's actually, the returns don't look that great. But when you think of that money eroding, that gives us that uplift straight away by putting it into a property which is also moving along at the same pace as that, rather than the bank. So that's why I say to people, like, getting something, even if they're like, look, I just want something simple, I want something easy, I'd support them through buying what is termed a vanilla buy to let, because you've got the asset sat there, which becomes an asset if it's managed well, which, all right, you've bought it at market value and it might only make you £100 a month in your hand, but brilliant compared to what you were getting. Even if the property breaks even, you still have it sat there. It's a nice thing to have.
Yeah, you're right. And you've got something that has potential to grow in value as well, rather than just not. And even it, like you say, even if you break even, you've still got the potential for it to grow. Even if it doesn't grow this year, or doesn't grow next year, or doesn't grow for the next 10 years, you will always have that potential. Whereas if it's sat in the bank, it's guaranteed to drop in value. And again, that's a guarantee. You can't get it. That's just natural economics. And quite frankly, I don't think a lot of people understand that. And I don't mean that in any condescending way. I think that, like we said at the beginning of this, when you've got that 50 grand sat in the bank, you feel safe, you know it's there. And you don't realize that when you put that in the bank 10 years ago, the pound was worth a lot less. As you just said. You know, back then you could buy a loaf of bread for £1, but today, 10 years later, it's £1.50. So really, you're just constantly losing money, because the number £50,000 is still £50,000 sat in your bank. Anyway, again, we could go for hours, I must admit. But what I'd love to do now is, for the benefit of everybody listening here, I hope that helps. It's some really good tips from real life property investors who I think have been at both ends of the scale, meaning they've started out in property investing, they've made some mistakes, they started out small, just seeing what they could turn their money into with no real experience, correct me if I'm wrong, but no real direct property investment experience. You just went for it, you did what you thought was right. And you had some bad experiences, you had some good experiences, and then you turned it into a business. And that's where I think everybody should aspire to. And so what I'm going to do now for everybody listening here is I'm going to, introduce the second phase of this interview, and I'm probably going to do this as a separate episode now. So if you're listening to this now and you like what you're hearing so far, then hold on for the next episode, because we're going to put all the pressure on Kiera. We're going to put Kiera under the spotlight, because Kiera has a pretty amazing story, which I think a lot of people will relate to. And it's all about going from that 9 till 5, well, not 9 till 5 in that industry, as you know, but going from that full-time employed job, then going through that decision of turning it into a property investment career for yourself, but along the way, a bit of a rocky road, which, again, I think a lot of people, in one way or another, have that little period of time where they think, I've got to do something different with my life. I want to do something different with my life. So tune in for the next episode on that. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you very much for James and Kiera for joining me on this episode of The Anonymous Landlord. And remember that your property is not your baby. It's not your blood, sweat and tears. It's not the love of your life. It's nothing like that. Your property is nothing more than a vehicle which is designed to make profit without you. And that's the point. So thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Tom. And yeah, like I said, check out realmproperty.co.uk. We've got 2 places at the moment that are having quite extensive works on that we're going to keep up to date on there and on our Instagram page. So yeah, check it out.
Yeah, I certainly will. And I think there's probably a separate conversation as well, because with this podcast, I speak to a lot of investors that are in that situation that we're talking about, where they might have a smaller amount of money and don't really know what to do with it. And so, you know, there could be another conversation to have there as well. So
totally agree.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. We'll try and help as many people as we can. Right. So we'll end it there. Tune in for the next episode and I will catch you on the other side.